What does the Earth look like at the time of the Megafauna? Dear traveler, greetings. Today we walk the plains of a forgotten world, from icy plains where mammoths roamed, to forests where smilodons prowled, to mountaintops dominated by titanic megatheriums. The megafauna reigned over every landscape. A colossal fauna, powerful, relentless, whose reign, as spectacular as it was, lasted only an instant in the scale of time. But why did these giants disappear? But before heading out on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Thank you and bon voyage. We are at the first moments of the Paleocene, around 66 million years ago, just after the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. This episode, marked by the extinction of most non-avian dinosaurs, wiped out much of ancient life. The world then changes abruptly and opens up as a vast territory of opportunities for the surviving species. Marine and flying reptiles, once masters of the sky and oceans, have disappeared, giving way to new lineages ready to shine. After the extinction, Earth enters a phase of intense warming. Heat is more evenly distributed than today, reducing the gap between the equator and the poles. Vast tropical forests then spread over a large part of the globe and create a humid and abundant climate. In this lush setting, the niches left by dinosaurs open up to new species. After the crisis, placental and marsupial mammals undergo a spectacular expansion. Freed from the domination of large dinosaurs, they quickly take on varied ecological roles: insectivores, specialized herbivores, or aquatic forms. In a few million years, their lineages produce increasingly larger species. This repeated growth in different groups reveals the same mechanism. Distinct lineages evolve towards bulkiness to access new resources. Among examples of Paleocene gigantism, snakes hold a spectacular place. It is then that Titanoboa terragenensis emerges, able to exceed 13 meters and weigh over a ton. Its name means Titanic Boa of Terragen, referring to the Colombian site where its fossils were found. Titanoboa thrived in burning marshes, spending most of its time in shallow waters, lying in wait to surprise its aquatic prey. Titanoboa was a piscivore, mainly feeding on fish. Imagine this giant lurking underwater, hidden in the foliage, suddenly bursting forth to snatch an unsuspecting prey. In Terragen, Colombia, its habitat mixed tropical forests and marshes under a stifling climate, often exceeding 30 degrees Celsius. These ideal conditions supported such a reptile's metabolism. Titanoboa thus embodies the vigor and diversity of Paleocene life. Near rivers and marshes, other giant reptiles dominated the waters. Crocodilians, ancestors of crocodiles, alligators, and gharials, reached impressive sizes and thrived in the deltas, feeding on fish and small mammals. Alongside them, giant turtles held a major place. Carbonomys cafrini, for example, bore a shell over 1.5 meters and fed on plants as well as small prey. Interactions between these giants were undoubtedly complex. Titanoboa could compete with some crocodilians for aquatic prey, but each probably occupied a distinct ecological space, limiting confrontations. In the Terragen marshes, life was abundant, and each species found its place in the food chain. Fossils from this region offer a rare window into these tropical ecosystems, often absent from drier or temperate geological records. Simultaneously, mammals continued their expansion. In the canopy, small primates appeared, taking advantage of the abundance of fruits and insects. On the ground, others explored new diets, freed from the domination of large dinosaurs. Marsupials, ancestors of kangaroos and opossums, were highly diverse, but they had to compete with placentals, advantaged by their ability to carry their young to a more developed stage. At the end of the Paleocene, larger mammals already appear, heralding the forms of the Eocene. Their success is due to two factors: the disappearance of former competitors and the richness of the forests. The high level of carbon dioxide promoted abundant vegetation, feeding a dynamic food chain. In this context, without giant predators, mammals were able to assert themselves and experiment with new morphologies. The Paleocene also marks the early stages of the evolution of future cetaceans. Whales and dolphins are not yet present, but certain terrestrial lineages are already beginning to move toward the water. At the end of this period, the Pachycetidae, ancestors of whales, appear. They still resemble small terrestrial carnivores, but their future adaptations will lead them to a marine life. The study of Paleocene ecosystems relies on various scientific methods. Among them, the argon 40 on argon 39 dating is essential for dating geological layers. It consists of comparing the proportions of two argon isotopes, slight variants of the same element. This measurement allows determining the age of volcanic rocks surrounding the fossils, and thus situating in time the giant creatures discovered. Palynology, the study of fossil pollen and spores, provides another valuable key. These microscopic grains, produced by plants for reproduction, can be preserved for millions of years. Their analysis in sediments allows reconstructing vegetation and thus the ancient climate. In the Paleocene, this method reveals the domination of dense and humid forests, proof of a much warmer climate than today. The isotopes called delta-13 carbon and delta-18 oxygen also help in understanding the Paleocene. Their ratio, measured in fossils or marine sediments, reveals clues about vegetation, precipitation, and water temperature. A rise in delta-13 carbon indicates denser vegetation, while delta-18 oxygen provides information on climate and freshwater presence. These scientific clues allow reconstructing life in the Paleocene. It was a warm and humid world dominated by dense forests where species diversified rapidly. In the waters, Titanoboa and Carbonemys illustrate the possible gigantism, while crocodilians, heirs of the Mesozoic, continued their prosperity. Mammals, on the other hand, took advantage of the liberated niches to initiate a real evolutionary leap. The Eocene is a key stage in Earth's history. From 56 to 34 million years ago, this period experienced several warmings, the most intense being the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM. This heat peak transformed the climate and made humid forests thrive even in latitudes that are temperate today. To understand this vanished world, it is necessary to examine its context, its terrestrial and marine fauna, and the scientific methods that reveal its secrets. At the beginning of the Eocene, Earth was undergoing rapid warming. The atmosphere, rich in carbon dioxide, raised the global temperature by several degrees compared to today. The ice caps had almost disappeared, leaving the poles without permanent ice sheets. This mild climate even reached high latitudes, where forests and coastal marshes thrived. The oceans, also warmed, saw their chemistry and the distribution of marine life profoundly altered. The PETM corresponds to a massive release of carbon into the atmosphere and oceans. Researchers explain it by the release of marine methane, volcanic activity, or the decomposition of gas hydrates. Whatever the causes, the effect was clear: a lasting warming that transformed ecosystems and forced species to adapt. Forests then extended into regions previously too cold to host them. After this initial heat peak, the Eocene optimal remained marked by very warm conditions for several million years. In this lush Earth, vegetation extended uninterrupted and animals diversified rapidly. Among them, several lines of herbivores occupied new niches. The vegetative abundance and mild climate favored their gigantism and specialization. Let's now discover some of these giants of the Eocene forests. In these forests lived Wintotherium anceps, meaning the beast of the Winta, referring to Utah where its fossils were discovered. This 2-ton mammal sported a skull adorned with bony protrusions and long canine-like teeth. These excrescences probably served in territorial or reproductive rivalries, while its canines could also play a defensive role. An herbivore, Uintatherium consumed leaves, young branches, and fruits, depending on the season, despite still sensitive climatic variations. Also, among the giants of the Eocene were the brontotheres, or titanotheres, known as Brontotherium and Megacerops. These large perissodactyls, distant relatives of horses and rhinoceroses, likely lived in wooded savannas or sparse forests. Standing over 2 meters at the shoulder and weighing several tons, they often sported a Y-shaped protrusion formed from fused horns. This structure likely served to intimidate, compete among males, and deter potential predators. In the Eocene ecosystems, predators played an essential role in maintaining balance. Among them were the hyenodonts, represented by hyenodon. Despite its name, it was not a hyena, but a carnivore specialized in meat. Its jaws, armed with sharp teeth, could attack both wounded herbivores and medium-sized prey. Depending on the species, hyenodon ranged from the size of a wolf to that of a bear, reflecting the extraordinary diversity of this group. Andrewsarchus, discovered through a colossal skull in Mongolia, remains an enigmatic predator of the Eocene. Over 60 centimeters long, this skull shows dentition adapted to hunting or scavenging, but the rest of its anatomy remains unknown. Some paleontologists consider it one of the largest terrestrial carnivores, while others relate it more closely to primitive ungulates. In any case, Andrewsarchus embodies the complexity of Eocene ecosystems and the uncertainties related to incomplete fossils. During the Eocene, warm oceans saw the emergence of the first cetaceans, symbols of the transition from land to sea. Among them, Basilosaurus isis and Dorudon atrox are emblematic. Basilosaurus, meaning royal lizard, was nonetheless a marine mammal. Measuring 15 to 18 meters long, its serpentiform body contrasted with that of modern whales. It still possessed small, atrophied hind legs and actively hunted fish and other prey in these abundant seas. Dorudon atrox, smaller than Basilosaurus at 5 meters, represented a more advanced stage towards marine life. More hydrodynamic, it moved efficiently and mainly hunted fish and mollusks, occupying the role of a medium predator. The study of its skulls and jaws allows scientists to reconstruct its diet and lifestyle. This adaptation marks a decisive step, heralding the future diversity of modern whales, orcas, and dolphins. The Eocene also saw the rise of giant birds, the gastornithids, once called diatryma. Standing nearly 2 meters tall, heavy, and equipped with robust legs, they were distinguished by a broad and powerful beak. Long described as predators of young mammals, they are now considered more likely herbivores or omnivores, consuming hard seeds, fruits, and plants. Whatever their exact diet, these birds played a major role in seed dispersal and influencing vegetation. To reconstruct Eocene life, researchers also used dental microwear analysis. This technique examines the marks left on fossil enamel under a microscope: scratches, notches, or fractures. Carnivores produce distinct traces from those of herbivores chewing tough plants, while frugivores leave a lighter signal. These microtraces thus reveal dietary composition, whether it involves animal prey or available plant variety. Paleobotany, or the study of fossil plants, also provides valuable clues. Researchers use the CLAMP, Climate Leaf Analysis Multivariate program, which compares the characteristics of fossil leaves to those of current species. Since leaf morphology is closely tied to climate, this method allows the reconstruction of temperature, precipitation, or humidity. Thus, a high proportion of large leaves with smooth margins and thick cuticles indicates a warm and humid climate, typical of tropical environments. Magnetostratigraphy also plays a key role in dating geological layers. The Earth's magnetic field has reversed many times, and sediments preserve this record according to the orientation of their minerals. By comparing these reversals to reference curves, researchers date the strata and accurately place fossils. Associated with paleobotany and dental microwear, this method has helped to create an ever more accurate picture of the Eocene. For us, the Eocene may seem distant, almost unreal. Yet fossils, sedimentary rocks, and even the magnetic imprint of soils are silent witnesses. They tell of an erased but essential past. And while this world differs greatly from ours, its lessons remain: adaptations, climatic upheavals, niche expansions. All reminders that Earth lives at the rhythm of fragile dynamics and long-standing equilibriums, always under threat. The study of the Eocene shows how warming and excess carbon dioxide affect the distribution of forests, the size of animals, or the chemistry of oceans. These lessons resonate with our present, where climate threatens biodiversity. The giants of that time proved that life can thrive in a warm world, but also that upheavals can be sudden. The transition of cetaceans illustrates mammals' ability to conquer new environments as conditions change. Research continues to fill in the blanks of the Eocene. Fossils are sometimes fragmentary, and the classification of genera like Andrewsarchus remains debated, with a single skull able to fuel opposing views. Despite these uncertainties, progress is constant thanks to modern techniques: microscopy, 3D imaging, molecular analyses. Every discovery refines our understanding of the era's environments and tests hypotheses inherited from the past. Studying the Eocene is to discover the power of adaptation of life, but also its fragility. Every fossil, every magnetic reversal, every leaf imprint reveals a part of this exuberant past, where plants and giant animals wrote an essential chapter of natural history. We now enter the Oligocene, from 34 to 23 million years ago. This epoch marks a significant cooling. Indeed, the decrease in carbon dioxide reduces the greenhouse effect and favors the formation of Antarctic ice sheets. Ecosystems are transformed. Humid forests recede, replaced by sparse grasslands and savannas. These new environments impose rapid adaptation on the fauna, paving the way for forms of life different from those of the Eocene. These open spaces spread across vast plains, where lower and sparser vegetation contrasted with dense forests. Faunal communities formed capable of consuming tough plants or traveling far to feed. Under these conditions, many mammal groups diversified. The drier conditions also favored greater heat resistance and an increased ability to travel long distances. Paraceratherium, once called Indricotherium, was one of the giants of the Oligocene. This perissodactyl, related to horses and rhinoceroses, is considered the largest terrestrial mammal ever known, weighing 15 to 20 tons and standing over 5 meters at the shoulder. Its long neck and massive head allowed it to reach high vegetation, a decisive advantage for feeding in the vast open landscapes of that time. Dubbed the browsing navigator, Paraceratherium used its long neck to reach elevated foliage, thus escaping competition from smaller herbivores. But its colossal size implied enormous energy needs. In regions marked by a dry season, it had to travel long distances to find water and food. This strategy relied on a powerful digestive system capable of extracting maximum nutrients from poor quality vegetation. Among the notable creatures of the Oligocene were the entelodonts, with Archaeotherium being the best known. Nicknamed hell pigs for their fearsome appearance, they weighed up to 400 kilos. Their massive jaws could crush meat, bones, or tougher foods. They are often described as robust omnivores, but their exact diet remains debated: scavengers, opportunistic predators, or competitors for certain animal resources. The entelodonts took advantage of the open environments of the Oligocene to expand their territory. These spaces facilitated the search for carcasses or the tracking of weakened prey. Their massive skulls and powerful jaws gave them a biting force capable of defending a catch or taking down a medium-sized animal. But these hell pigs remained under pressure, because in the face of other emerging predators, the competition for resources was intense. In these changing landscapes, the dominant carnivores changed face with the emergence of the amphicyonids. They are nicknamed bear dogs for their hybrid appearance. Some resembled bears, others large canines. Powerful and muscular, equipped with sharp teeth and great mobility, they could just as easily pursue their prey as assert themselves against scavengers. Their evolutionary success marked a key step in the reorganization of the Oligocene food chains. At the same time, the creodonts, former masters among the carnivores, began their decline. Equipped with powerful jaws and teeth made for meat, they were long-feared predators. But the rise of the amphicyonids and other lineages, better adapted to open terrains, gradually relegated them. Less agile in the face of these rivals and weakened by climate and habitat changes, the creodonts gradually disappeared from the evolutionary scene. This rivalry shows how vital specialization becomes in a changing world. The bear dogs, capable of adapting their diet and hunting techniques, exploit varied niches, hunting alone or in groups, depending on the prey. The creodonts, on the other hand, remained stuck in their old strategies and gradually gave way. The advantage, therefore, goes to the more modern and flexible carnivores. To understand the formation of the open environments of the Oligocene, researchers analyze, among other things, paleosols, these fossilized soils that retain the chemistry of ancient environments. The carbon content allows for the reconstruction of vegetation, while the study of carbon and oxygen isotopes provides information on average temperature and humidity. These data offer an accurate picture of the conditions that then shape the fauna and flora. These geochemical analyses reveal whether landscapes were more wooded or dominated by grasses. An increase in carbon isotopes in the soils often signals the increased presence of grasses. Cross-referenced with fossils of large perissodactyls adapted to open environments, these data offer a clear picture of the Oligocene. The morphology of teeth and hooves confirms these results by indicating the animal's dietary habits and modes of movement. Paleontologists also analyze the composition of fossil communities, called indicator faunas, which reveal the nature of habitats. The presence of entelodonts or large herbivores with legs built for running suggests open environments. Similarly, some amphicyonids, built for prolonged pursuits, testify to open-field hunting. Piece by piece, these clues paint a picture where competition, mobility, and adaptation reigned over the Oligocene ecosystems. To illustrate the openness of the environments, one can imagine vast semi-arid plains dotted with shrubs and a few isolated trees. The dry climate favors the emergence of sparse savannas, where large mammals travel long distances to find water. Watering holes then become strategic, attracting dozens of species and their lurking predators. Giant herbivores, like Paraceratherium, gather there as well, despite their immense dietary needs. It should be remembered that the portrait of the Oligocene is a reconstruction based on incomplete fossils. Every new discovery refines or corrects the established scenarios. A partial skeleton can revise the estimate of a size. A footprint modifies the interpretation of a diet. Researchers are still exploring the distribution of Paraceratherium or the diversity of entelodonts. Each additional fossil enriches and nuances our vision of this fascinating age. The coexistence of species shows how rich in ecological interactions the Oligocene was. The large herbivores altered the landscape by promoting the growth of new plants, while carnivores regulated their populations. But this balance remained precarious. A climatic or geographical change was enough to break the dynamics. These ancient ecosystems remind us of the complexity of a world where each group played a vital role in collective adaptation. Everything was interconnected. The Miocene extends from 23 to 5.3 million years ago and marks a key stage in evolution. The planet, slightly warmer than today, sees the expansion of dry areas and the retreat of forests in favor of vast grasslands. This change is linked to the expansion of C4 photosynthesis plants, better adapted to open environments. Their proliferation feeds immense herds of herbivores. In this context, hypsodont teeth, tall and resistant, become a decisive asset for grinding tough and abrasive vegetation. The expansion of Miocene grasses is due to their particular mode of photosynthesis called C4. More efficient at capturing and using carbon dioxide, it promotes their growth in hot and dry environments. This mechanism gives them a clear advantage over C3 plants, less adapted to these conditions. Gradually, C4 grasses dominate the landscapes. Their tough leaves then push herbivores to develop hypsodont teeth, tall and resistant, capable of overcoming them. With the expansion of C4 grasslands, new habitats favor the rise of giant herbivores. Proboscideans, ancestors of elephants, then diversify into multiple forms. Among them, the Gomphotheres, like Gomphotherium, sometimes bore 4 tusks, 2 upper and 2 lower, ideal for rooting the soil or uprooting aquatic plants. Present on several continents, they modified the landscapes by dispersing seeds under their steppes and creating muddy trails around water points. Among the Miocene proboscideans, Deinotheres, of the genus Deinotherium, were distinguished by their downward curving tusks. Attached to the lower jaw, they formed an intriguing hook for paleontologists. These tusks likely served to tear off low branches, bark trunks, or manipulate vegetation. With their colossal bodies weighing several tons, Deinotheres combined a unique appearance with efficiency in sparse savanna environments or at the forest edge. Also appearing in the Miocene were the first mastodons, distinct from modern elephants. Their molars, equipped with prominent ridges, were adapted for chewing a variety of leaves, fruits, and grasses. Today, the term mastodon is sometimes used to refer to any large extinct animal, but in reality, these proboscideans formed a well-defined group with dental characteristics that distinguish them as much from current elephants as from other extinct lineages. With the rise of large herbivores and the expansion of grasslands, new predators emerge. Among them are the bear dogs, Amphision, halfway between canids and ursids. Their massive bodies, robust skulls, and powerful limbs made them effective hunters, capable of both pursuing prey and overpowering it by force. Opportunistic, they could also consume carrion, adopting varied strategies to survive in changing environments. Among the earliest saber-toothed cats is Megafauna, recognizable by its long, flattened canines. These predators did not belong to a single group, but to several distinct lineages that converged toward the same adaptation. Their canines, capable of inflicting deep wounds, however, required a precise kill to avoid breaking. A precursor to the famous saber-tooths, Megafauna illustrates the rise of specialized carnivores, made possible by the abundance of giant herbivores. In the Miocene, some hyenas develop a robust morphology adapted to bone crushing, allowing them to exploit carcasses or tackle substantial prey. This bone-crushing diet offered them the advantage of accessing marrow, a valuable nutritional resource. Much more varied than today, the hyenas of the time were not confined to the role of quick scavengers, but occupied several ecological niches in open ecosystems. As the Earth saw the organization of grasslands and sparse forests, the oceans of the Miocene also hosted their giants. The most feared was the shark Otodus megalodon, which could exceed 15 meters in length. Its name, giant tooth, comes from its enormous triangular teeth, sometimes more than 10 centimeters high. With an unmatched jaw power, it hunted whales, primitive seals, or marine turtles, embodying the ultimate super predator of the seas of that time. At the same time, Leviathan melvillei lived, a giant sperm whale nicknamed the macrophage for its enormous teeth. Unlike modern sperm whales, which have teeth only at the bottom and primarily hunt squids, it also had teeth on the upper jaw, adapted to capturing large marine vertebrates, perhaps even other whales. A formidable predator, Leviathan rivaled the megalodon, illustrating the ferocity and enormity of the Miocene oceans. On land, artiodactyls experience significant changes. They include bovines, deer, giraffes, and other ungulates. Some archaic giraffids, with still short necks, already hint at the adaptation that would lead to the modern giraffe. It involves reaching food inaccessible to other herbivores. In parallel, massive bovids explored the grasslands, armed with sturdy hooves and defensive or ornamental horns. This trend towards gigantism reflects the abundance of grasses, but also the necessity to cover vast distances to survive. A large body offers several advantages: better thermal regulation, increased energy reserves, and protection against predators. But it also requires more food and slow growth, making species vulnerable to climatic changes or resource scarcity. The Miocene vividly illustrates this principle. Climate evolution and the rise of grasslands directly shaped the morphology and behavior of a whole fauna. To reconstruct life in the Miocene, researchers analyze fossil dental enamel and its isotopic composition. Delta-13 carbon indicates the proportion of carbon-13, which varies depending on the type of vegetation. C4 plants, adapted to dry grasslands, are richer in it than C3 plants, typical of forests. Thus, teeth marked by high values reveal a habitat dominated by grasslands, while low values indicate a forested environment. The study of neodymium and strontium in fossil teeth also allows mapping the geographic origin of animals. These elements reflect the geology of the regions where they fed and drank. Thus, a migratory herbivore inscribes the memory of its travels in its skeleton, revealing the extent of its journeys and migration corridors. This type of analysis notably sheds light on the movements of proboscideans, whose journeys influence the distribution of ecosystems. Calibrated molecular phylogenies, based on fossil DNA or genetic data from current species close to ancient lineages, allow dating the appearance of groups. Even though DNA rarely preserves beyond a few 100,000 years, one can compare fossils and modern species to estimate divergences. These methods establish a molecular clock, using the age of rocks or key fossils to pinpoint the emergence of species. Thanks to these methods, paleontologists recreate a Miocene dominated by grassy savannas and the rise of large mammals. Herds of proboscideans roam immense territories, shaping the vegetation. In their wake, bear dogs and saber-toothed cats adapt their hunting techniques to exploit these giant prey. In the oceans, Otodus megalodon and Leviathan melville dominate as superpredators, sharing large marine vertebrates. The Miocene marks a decisive stage in evolution. The climate and the expansion of C4 plants instate vast grasslands populated by large herds. Herbivores achieved impressive sizes, while carnivores adapted their morphology and behaviors to confront robust prey and compete against each other. Ecological balance rested on mobility, defense, and offense. Growing larger is not limited to eating more. The needs for water, thermal regulation, and environmental pressure also increase. Giant herbivores consumed enormous amounts of vegetation, permanently altering the local flora. Predators, both terrestrial and marine, required vast hunting grounds. The Miocene thus appears as a mosaic of fragile ecosystems, in constant balance between available resources and the demands of an ever more adaptable fauna. In these ever-changing environments, evolution constantly reshuffles the deck. Some species adapt, others go extinct, while new lineages appear. For scientists, each fossil or rock fragment reveals a clue about this history. The Miocene not only sheds light on a fascinating chapter of the past, but also serves as a mirror, showing how major environmental upheavals can transform current fauna and flora. Between 5.3 and 2.58 million years ago, the Pliocene stands out as a pivotal stage in Earth's history. Indeed, the Earth enters a gradual cooling phase, breaking away from the warmth of the Miocene, while climate variability intensifies. Habitats are redistributed, transforming the distribution of species. In the oceans, the emergence of cold and nutrient-rich upwellings boosts productivity. Marine ecosystems then enrich themselves, offering new resources to species capable of adapting to this changing environment. On the continents, the climate of the Pliocene shapes contrasting landscapes, sparse savannas, grassy plains, and scattered forests. Some areas dry out, while others remain humid. This instability pushes species to continually adapt. Several groups then develop traits to survive in open and sometimes arid environments. Large herbivores diversify and grow, playing a key role in seed dispersal and the transformation of vegetation by their grazing and trampling. In the Pliocene, elephants of the genera Elephas and Stegodon appear, closer to our modern elephants than the mastodons were. Massive and armed with long tusks, they thrive mainly in Asia, in open savannas and forests, rich in vegetation. In quest of food, they transform landscapes by uprooting, breaking, or modifying the composition of plants. Through their presence, these giant pachyderms occupy new ecological niches and take over from older lineages. In Africa, hippos develop extensively in wet areas and along rivers. Massive and stocky, with a large head and imposing canines, they spend their days in the water to protect themselves from the heat and support their weight. At night, they graze on riverbank grasses. Their dependence on aquatic environments dictates their territory and distribution, making water a vital element of their ecology. The Pliocene also sees the appearance of the first cheetahs of the genus Acinonyx, settling in Africa and Asia. Taking advantage of open plains, they specialize in speed thanks to a slender body, elongated limbs, and a very flexible spine. This combination allows them to accelerate rapidly and surprise their prey before any reaction. They likely hunted small to medium-sized herbivores or young of large mammals, asserting their role as lightning predators. Alongside the cheetahs also appear the large saber-toothed cats, ancestors of the famous Smilodon. Their elongated canines, similar to sabers, likely served to quickly bring down large prey. They hunted by ambush, taking advantage of reasonably dense vegetation to approach before delivering a fatal bite to the neck. Although their exact method is debated, these Pliocene predators already played a key role in regulating herbivores and maintaining ecosystem balance. In South America, the Pliocene sees the appearance of giant rodents like Josephoartigaceae monesi, which could exceed 50 kilos, sometimes much more, according to estimates. A close relative of the modern capybara, it likely lived in wet areas, grazing on aquatic plants and riverside vegetation. Its robust anatomy supported its considerable mass. Like many herbivores, it contributed to seed dispersal, favoring the regeneration of ecosystems it traversed. Large antelopes and equids develop a hypsodont dentition, characterized by high dental crowns, resistant to wear. In a drier climate, grass replaces some of the tender foliage and is often accompanied by dust and abrasive particles. These extended teeth allow continued grazing without losing efficiency. This adaptation, visible in the ancestors of modern horses, illustrates the selective pressure that shapes the most advantageous traits in response to a changing environment. With the expansion of the grasslands, many animals adapted to running thrive. They gather in herds. This organization facilitates the monitoring of predators and access to food. Felines and canids adapt. Some hunt in groups, while others rely on speed to isolate a prey. The balance rests on a play of reciprocal adaptations, where each weakness or innovation becomes a lever for evolution. Beyond biology, the Pliocene provides valuable environmental clues. Biogeography, which studies the distribution of species in time and space, shows that continents take on a configuration close to the current one. One of the major events is the gradual formation of the Isthmus of Panama. By connecting North America and South America, this land bridge closes the old marine passage and prepares for vast biological exchanges between the two continents. From the Pliocene onward, the first signs of this intercontinental exchange appear with the progress of species between North and South America. Fossils, datings, and the study of anatomical features allow researchers to follow this dynamic and understand the gradual formation of quaternary assemblages. This period thus acts as a prelude, where the great biological movements that will mark the natural history of the continents are already being outlined. During the Pleistocene, between 3 and 2.6 million years ago, the closure of the Isthmus of Panama profoundly transforms America. This land bridge finally unites the North and the South, which were previously separate with their distinct ecosystems. Before, the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans communicated freely. After, the filled barrier opens a terrestrial corridor. This passage triggers the Great American Biotic Interchange, massive migrations, new sources of food, uncharted territories, and confrontations with already present species. The closure of the Isthmus of Panama results from complex tectonic and volcanic processes. Over millennia, the ocean floor rises, bringing forth an archipelago between the two continents. Gradually, these islands coalesce to form a continuous land bridge, blocking marine circulation. The Americas then cease to evolve separately. This junction fosters encounters, competitions, and sometimes hybridizations among species, renewing biodiversity. It also alters ocean currents, although we focus here on its terrestrial effects. The Great American Biotic Interchange leads to migrations in both directions. North American species move south, and others make the reverse journey. Among the most notable are camelids, ancestors of llamas and alpacas. Originating from North America and cousins of the Old World camels, they cross the isthmus thanks to their great adaptability. Once in South America, they evolve into native species, becoming the Andean llamas and alpacas. Their success stems from their climate resistance, frugality, and endurance. In the other direction, from South America, migrate the xenarthrans, an original group of placental mammals, including sloths, anteaters, and armadillos. Some, sometimes gigantic, make it to North America. We thus find the megalonyx, a terrestrial sloth that could weigh several hundred kilos, exploring new territories. Traveling with it are giant armadillos, including glyptodons, protected by a domed shell. Thanks to the terrestrial corridor, these animals venture into new environments, marking a key step in their evolution. A striking aspect of the Great Exchange is the arrival of North American carnivores in South America. The canids, dogs, wolves, foxes, and coyotes, established themselves facing a herbivorous fauna that was until then little exposed to their hunting methods. The felines also cross the isthmus and conquer new territories. Their establishment disrupts the ecological balance. Local prey, ill-prepared for such predators, and indigenous hunters enter into fierce competition, triggering a phase of rapid adjustments. In South America, the fauna includes true giants. The glyptodon, an armored herbivore, has an almost impenetrable dome-shaped shell. Its close relative, the Doedicurus, wields a spiked club-like tail, a formidable weapon against predators. The Macrauchenia, resembling a llama, sports a snout with a short, trunk-like appendage. As for the Toxodon, stocky and heavy, it thrives in wet and open areas. Long isolated, these colossi see their balance disrupted by the arrival of predators and herbivores coming from the north. In North America, it is the arrivals from the south that mark history. Giant sloths of the genus Megalonyx spread out accompanied by other armored xenarthrans, close relatives of glyptodons. There are also giant armadillos, much larger than their modern descendants. These migrations lead to conflicts. Indeed, competing herbivores and predators suddenly find their resources shared. The distribution of animal communities is then disrupted, with each species seeking the most favorable niche. This faunal mixing imposes new ecological pressures. Local species face new competitors for food, be it in forests, savannas, or arid plains. Niches previously little occupied are quickly taken over by better adapted migrants. Some foreign predators introduce hunting techniques against which native herbivores are unprepared, sustainably disrupting the prey-predator balance. The arrival of giant or armored animals also forces resident carnivores to invent new strategies or avoid overly risky prey. All this leads to the formation of new super-predator guilds, species occupying similar ecological roles. North American felines and canids, in competition with large local carnivores or opportunistic hunters, engage in a true race for adaptation. Pumas and jaguars must share their prey with robust wolves or wild dogs. Even bears, although often omnivorous, add extra pressure, In some regions, large scavenging birds benefit from the abundance of carcasses left by these increased confrontations. To establish the chronology of the Great Biotic Exchange and date the arrival of different groups, paleontologists and geologists use several methods. One of the most commonly used is north-south stratigraphic correlation, comparing sediment layers from different regions to verify if they are of the same age. Studying the strata and the fossils they contain helps identify when a group appears or disappears. If a fossil is found both north and south in identical layers, it suggests it could already cross the isthmus. Index faunas, well-dated indicator species, also serve as reliable markers to establish age equivalences between sites. The 40R39R method allows for precise dating of volcanic rocks. It relies on the gradual transformation of radioactive potassium into argon. By comparing the proportion of naturally produced argon-40 to that of argon-39, obtained in the laboratory as a reference, one calculates the age of the rocks surrounding the fossils. For example, if a glyptodont is found under a flow dated at 2.7 million years, it is known that it lived before or at that time. Combined with stratigraphic analyses, this method offers a reliable chronological framework to place each migratory stage. Research shows that the peak of migrations extends between 3 and 2.6 million years ago, when the isthmus arises enough to allow terrestrial passage. Its formation is not instantaneous. It results from successive phases, sometimes interrupted by rising seas and tectonic activity. Once the corridor is open, animal dispersion accelerates and truly launches the Great American Biotic Exchange. Fossils found both north and south then testify to the unprecedented cohabitation of once separated species. The encounter of these two faunas was not always peaceful. Some North American lineages, better equipped for hunting, sometimes dominated South American carnivores. Conversely, the armor of glyptodonts, or the bulk of toxodon, posed serious challenges to predators inexperienced with such adversaries. The discovery of new prey also favored the diversification of small felines capable of specializing. Gradually, balances settled in, reshaping biodiversity in both Americas. Exchange does not concern only large mammals. Birds, rodents, and reptiles also cross the corridor. This facilitates migrations on all scales, intensifying competition for limited resources. In some regions, the arrival of new herbivores transforms the plant landscape. They graze on plants that were previously little consumed, altering the composition of communities. In the long term, this reorganization influences habitat structures and the entire food chain. The Great American Biotic Interchange marks a major turning point in the history of terrestrial fauna. The collected data allows us to trace dispersion routes and identify adapted species, those in decline and those that have disappeared. Dating techniques such as stratigraphic correlations or 40R39R measurements allow us to specify the chronology. We can thus trace the history of each lineage from the Andean camelid to the Xenarthran settled in the Great Plains. In the lower and middle Pleistocene, between 2.58 million and 130,000 years before our era, a new equilibrium is established in the megafauna communities. This period, punctuated by glacial cycles, alternates between phases of intense cold and milder episodes. The variations of the Earth's axis and orbit modify the sunlight, influencing the distribution of species and the organization of habitats. Giant animals then occupy diverse niches, from frozen steppes to dense forests. The essential mark of this interval is the alternation of glacial cycles. Initially, it is 41,000 years. Then, over time, 100,000 years. These rhythms cause significant variations in sea level, a phenomenon called eustatism. When ice caps extend, immense volumes of water are trapped in ice, lowering ocean levels and revealing land bridges, such as Beringia between Asia and North America. When the ice recedes, the sea rises, re-isolating continents and altering animal distribution. These climatic changes create a mosaic of landscapes: grassy steppes, cold tundras, sparse savannas, or boreal forests in temperate zones. In these contrasting environments, large herbivores spread out and specialize. Some prefer open prairies, others the undergrowth, or the rocky terrains of mountains. This diversity of habitats also favors predators' adaptation to different prey. In the lower and middle Pleistocene, survival requires resisting extreme climates and frequently migrating over long distances. In Eurasia, two major lineages of prehistoric elephants develop. First, Mammuthus meridionalis, adapted to temperate climates, but already resistant to winters. From this species arises Mammuthus troghantheri, more robust, endowed with a dense coat, and features adapted to grazing on hard grasses. In parallel, the first aurochs and several bovids reinforce their adaptations to the cold with thick fur and fine-tuned thermal regulation. Hunting felines, ancestors of lions and tigers, also diversify their strategies. Eurasia thus becomes a true crucible of biological innovations. In Africa, the scenario differs. The glaciations are less marked there, due to the equatorial proximity and already ancient open ecosystems. The diversity of elephants remains stable, with the robust Loxodonta. Rhinos occupy various environments, from sandy plains to sparse forests. Hippos thrive in wet and riverine areas, while giant buffaloes form immense herds, ensuring strong herbivorous pressure. Alongside Homo, these species compose a world in constant co-evolution. This co-evolution relies mainly on the predation pressure exerted by Homo, who perfects its tools and adopts cooperative hunting. By occasionally targeting large herbivores, our ancestors influenced their distribution and behavior. In return, these animals provide food and raw materials for tools. The alternations of wet and dry phases also transform landscapes, opening corridors of dispersion for humans and animals. In the lower and middle Pleistocene, Africa remains an immense reservoir of biodiversity, already marked by the singular place of humans in ecological balances. In Asia appears the stegodon, a prehistoric elephant with gigantic tusks, adapted to tropical and subtropical forests. Unlike Eurasian mammoths, it thrives in wooded environments rich in foliage. In colder areas, primitive woolly rhinoceroses also emerge, witnesses to adaptation to changing climates. Massive deer with impressive antlers complete this picture. This faunal diversity illustrates the evolutionary flexibility of Asian giants in response to the variety of ecosystems. Modern study methods rely on multiple geological and paleontological sources. Variations in sea level leave traces in coastal sediments, deposits that reveal the advances and retreats of the sea. Land bridges, such as Beringia, also appear in the fossil records, where the dispersal of species is tracked. Finally, the analysis of loess, which are solidified dust, and paleosols, preserved ancient soils, illuminates past climates with their alternations of cold and warmth, as well as wind history. The MRI of sediments, or magnetic resonance imaging applied to ancient deposits, is a valuable tool for analyzing the internal structure of geological layers. It allows the detection of variations in composition or compaction related to paleo winds. By studying their direction and intensity, atmospheric dynamics, erosion, and vegetation distribution are reconstructed. Cross-referenced with fossils of large mammals, these data offer a coherent view of life in the early and middle Pleistocene. Dating then refines the chronology of the phases of expansion or recession of the megafauna. Understanding these dynamics is essential for anticipating the evolution of our current ecosystems. Fossils prove how the opening or closing of ecological corridors profoundly altered the fate of these populations. In this context, megafauna does not only concern terrestrial mammals. While elephants, rhinoceroses, buffaloes, or giant deer remain the most emblematic, large birds and powerful carnivores also marked the era. Other groups of invertebrates, reptiles, and birds benefited from climatic variations to disperse or specialize, even if their fossil records are less complete. Understanding megafauna thus requires integrating all organisms from these environments, true links in an essential ecological network. The Upper Pleistocene, between 130,000 and 11,700 years before our era, sees the rise of a unique biome, the mammoth steppe. This environment, between steppe and tundra, is characterized by low and nutritious vegetation, ideal for immense herds. Drier than temperate or tropical forests, it still offers astonishing productivity. Scientists talk about steppe tundra to describe this encounter between prairie grasses and Arctic cold-resistant plants. This mixture makes the landscape conducive to dense fauna, from sturdy reindeer to imposing woolly proboscideans. To grasp the richness of this biome, one must imagine vast plains almost devoid of trees, covered with nutritious grasses, capable of withstanding the winds and freezing winters. The climate alternates between humid phases and very cold, dry periods, with winters well below zero. Yet, as soon as temperatures ease, vegetation explodes. The long summer days and frost-thaw-enriched soils stimulate rapid growth. Wild cereals, hardy grasses, and a few shrubs taking advantage of summer humidity can be found. Thus, the steppe tundra appears as a sea of low plants, where trees struggle to establish themselves. In Eurasia stands Mammuthus primigenius, the woolly mammoth. Covered with a thick brown fleece and equipped with several meter-long curved tusks, it clears snow to reach buried grasses. Weighing several tons, it mainly feeds on steppe plants, occasionally uprooting them to diversify its diet. Living alongside it is the woolly rhinoceros, Colodonta antiquitatis. Massive and equipped with a dense coat, it withstands icy winds. Its powerful horns are used for uncovering frozen vegetation and for defense. Among the large Eurasian herbivores, the bison priscus stands out with its prominent hump and strength, allowing it to traverse snow. The musk ox, or ovibos, occupies a much larger area than it does today. The spectacular Megaloceros giganteus, or Irish elk, impresses with its antlers spanning several meters. Among carnivores, Eurasia is home to the cave lion called Panthera spelaea. It is probably more massive and better protected from the cold than its African cousin. The cave hyena, Hyaena spelaea, lives in clans with complex social structures and plays a key role as a predator scavenger. Finally, the wolf, Canis lupus, is already notable for its resilience to harsh climates and the efficiency of its collective hunting. Crossing Beringia, accessible during the glaciations, one reaches North America. The landscape resembles Eurasia, but with its own unique fauna. The Mammuthus columbi, or Columbian mammoth, dominates the plains. Its coat is less dense than that of its Eurasian cousin, as winters are sometimes less harsh. Alongside it lives the Mammoth americanum, the American mastodon. Close to the mammoths, but from a distinct lineage, it is recognized by its rounded molars, adapted to a diet of mixed grasses, leaves, and twigs. The region also houses Enochion dirus, the dire wolf, close to the Canis genus. This robust predator, with powerful jaws, hunted large prey in packs. There is also the short-faced bear, Artotus simus, a giant capable of standing at great heights, and surprising weakened herbivores due to its unusual speed for a bear. In the wetlands lives Castoroides, the giant beaver, weighing several dozen kilos and probably a builder of imposing lodges. On the plains roam camelops, a camelid reminiscent of camels, and Equus scotti, a prehistoric horse living in herds. Among the most astonishing creatures were the giant ground sloths, such as Paramylodon harlani and Nothrotheriops. Their slow gait took them from one patch of vegetation to another. Their imposing size offered some protection, but they remained vulnerable to coordinated attacks from wolves or other predators. In South America, the climate ranges from temperate to tropical, and the late Pleistocene witnesses the emergence of impressive species adapted to different environments. Megatherium and Eremotherium, two giant sloths weighing several tons, stood on their hind legs to reach branches and foliage, with powerful claws facilitating ripping. In the plains, Dodecurus and Glyptodon, both with bony armor, stood out. The former with its club-like tail used for defense, the latter resembling a giant armadillo, grazing near water sources. There was also Macrauchenia, with a long neck reminiscent of a camel, and Toxodon, massive like a hornless rhinoceros, sometimes semi-aquatic. At the summit reigned Smilodon populator, a formidable saber-toothed cat, combining stealth and power to hunt large prey. To complete this panorama of the mammoth steppe, one must turn to the landmass of Sahel, which then united Australia, Tasmania, and New Guinea. The climate, warmer than in the north, hosted an impressive megafauna. Diprotodon, the largest known marsupial, weighed up to 3 tons and resembled a giant wombat. Procoptodon, a colossal kangaroo, bounded over long distances with its powerful legs. Zygomaturus, a dweller of wetlands, fed on terrestrial and aquatic plants. Also present was Megalania, a gigantic monitor lizard several meters long, a predator capable of taking down large herbivores by bite. Australia still hosted Genyornis, a massive bird likely incapable of flight, and Thylacoleo, dubbed the marsupial lion, whose jaws sliced flesh with the force of shears. To understand the diversity of species and their lifestyles, paleontologists and geologists use several methods. One of the most common is analyzing the stable isotopes present in fossils and nearby sediments. The ratio of delta-15 nitrogen and delta-13 carbon is particularly telling. By studying isotopes contained in dentin, bones, or sedimentary deposits, one can reconstruct the diet and environment of an animal. Delta-15 nitrogen indicates the trophic level, carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore. As for delta-13 carbon, it reveals the type of vegetation consumed, whether prairie grasses or forest plants. In addition to chemical analyses, researchers also examine teeth under an electron microscope or in thin sections to identify microwear. These traces reveal the diet. Parallel scratches indicate consumption of tough grasses, while a mix of streaks and rounded depressions suggests tender leaves or more varied fibers. The study of fossil pollen and plant fragments sheds light on the dominant vegetation. The abundance of grasses confirms the steppe tundra, while an increase in birch or pine pollen reveals a climate change and the advancement of forests. An astonishing method relies on the study of coprophilous fungal spores, such as Sporormiella, a valuable indicator of herbivore density. These fungi develop on the droppings of large grazers. By tracking the quantity of spores in the sediments, researchers estimate herd evolution. Their scarcity often signals a decline in giant herbivores and a disruption of the ecosystem. Combined with other fossil evidence, this analysis illuminates the complex interactions of the mammoth steppe. We might imagine these landscapes as a planetary safari where mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, cave lions, giant bears, and colossal sloths share vast plains. Each continent harbored its own megafauna, adapted to the climates. This abundance relied on herbaceous plants, capable of withstanding climatic variations while nourishing massive bodies. Herbivores proliferated, and superpredators responded with collective or formidable hunting strategies. The mammoth steppe thus illustrated a grand balance between producer plants, consumer herbivores, and regulating carnivores. The late Pleistocene was not static. Climatic cycles remained very active and continually reshaped the landscapes. During milder phases, forests and shrubs regained ground, pushing the steppe towards cold or dry areas. It was a world both familiar, populated by groups we still know, and yet disorienting due to the size or strangeness of its inhabitants. The soils have preserved pollen, bones, and fossil carapaces, silent witnesses of this grand epoch. Isotopic analyses and the study of macroscopic plant remains confirm it was one of the biomes most productive in animal biomass. And even though many mysteries remain, each clue found in frozen sediments or deep caves adds a piece to the puzzle of this vanished ecosystem. The late Pleistocene marks the peak of a contrasting nature. Icy winds blew over snow-covered soils almost year-round, while summer light maintained abundant vegetation, capable of feeding immense herds of herbivores. This climate-vegetation duo, combined with animal evolution, shaped a vast ecological tableau. Archaeological and paleontological discoveries gradually reveal these interactions and emphasize the importance of preserving the memory of such an ecosystem. In studying the giant creatures of the past, one quickly encounters the question of their physiology. In these animals, the link between body mass and internal function is essential. This principle, called allometry, describes how morphology and biological functions vary with size. Metabolism, internal temperature, and energy expenditure follow precise trends related to the animal's size. Understanding these mechanisms offers a fascinating key to grasping the evolution of terrestrial giants. The ratio between surface area and volume plays a key role in thermoregulation. The larger the animal, the smaller its external surface relative to its volume, limiting heat loss. This principle, known as Bergmann's rule, explains why giants retain heat better than small organisms. But in a warm climate, this efficiency becomes a challenge. They must carefully shed excess heat to avoid overheating. Allometry also concerns mass-specific metabolism, that is, the energy expended per kilogram of weight. In large animals, this resting metabolism is lower than in small ones, as their needs are distributed over a larger mass. However, their total consumption remains enormous. Indeed, maintaining an organism weighing several tons requires a considerable amount of energy. Thus, even if the cost per kilo decreases, the overall expenditure remains overwhelming. Now, let's move on to teeth and their wear. Among megafauna, dentition varies according to diet. There are two main types, hypsodonty and brachydonty. The former, with high teeth and thick enamel, characterizes grazers that consume tough, abrasive grasses. The latter, with lower teeth, suits species that feed on tender foliage, which is less rich in mineral particles and therefore less aggressive on dental surfaces. To refine the understanding of dietary habits, paleontologists study dental microwear. Small pits and fine scratches reveal the texture of foods. A hard or mineral-rich diet produces more striations, while a foliage-rich diet results mainly in pits. The analysis of these marks, complemented by the three-dimensional study of textures, allows for the reconstruction of dietary ecology and sheds light on the adaptation of extinct species to their habitats. Studying the life cycle of megafauna leads to questions about their longevity and reproduction. Large animals often live longer than small species because they age more slowly, but their renewal remains limited. They reach sexual maturity late and produce few offspring. This strategy makes them vulnerable because a climate disruption or intensive hunting could quickly compromise their survival. The low birth rate of giants is explained by high parental investments. Adults protect their offspring for a long time, which prolongs the intervals between births. This slow cycle makes populations sensitive to rapid changes. If food becomes scarce or the habitat degrades, it becomes difficult to feed the young. A temporary decline in births can then jeopardize the survival of the group, as longevity does not always compensate for low fertility. We now enter the world of marine giants, present in our oceans for millions of years. From the water column to the abyss, they have conquered all ecological niches. We will focus on the Holocene and the modern era to understand why some thrive and others disappear. How did the blue whale reach such dimensions? Why did the Otodus megalodon shark go extinct? Baleen whales, or mysticetes, feed using large, horny plates that filter plankton and crustaceans. Among them, the blue whale, Balænoptera musculus, stands out for its gigantism. Weighing over 150 tons, it was the largest known animal. This exceptional size is made possible by exploiting plankton blooms, seasonal proliferations favored by ocean currents, which provide a dense and concentrated food resource. The giant size of mysticetes is explained by the conditions at the end of the Miocene and the Pliocene. The oceans were then marked by strong planktonic blooms, fueled by upwellings of nutrient-rich deep waters. These extremely productive zones offered baleen whales abundant and concentrated resources. Thanks to filter feeding, they could exploit this bounty without expending too much energy, paving the way for their exceptional body growth. Plankton, the base of the marine food chain, can proliferate in a few days during a bloom, offering filtering species abundant resources. Whales exploit these peaks with their baleen. They swallow volumes of water that they filter to retain prey while expelling the excess. This method, very energy efficient, maximizes their intake without the effort of hunting. Over time, it has favored gigantism, particularly in the blue whale, whose large size also improves thermal regulation in cold waters. In addition to cetaceans, pinnipeds and sirenians significantly contribute to marine ecosystems. By grazing on seagrasses and coastal invertebrates, they maintain the vitality of the seabeds, prevent overgrowth of vegetation, and foster the regeneration of flora. Their movements disperse nutrients and seeds, boosting local productivity. Through these functions, they act as true natural engineers, supporting the ecological balance of coastal zones and seagrass beds. Up until the Pliocene, the oceans were home to Otodus megalodon, equipped with a jaw capable of swallowing a human. It went extinct about 3 million years ago, likely due to a combination of the evolution of cetaceans, competition from other predators, and climate changes reducing its prey. Its disappearance disrupted marine balances and allowed for the rise of new large sharks and mammals, reshaping ocean dynamics for the long term. The decline of certain whales, essential prey for the megalodon, reduced its resources. At the same time, the emergence of more adapted predators, like primitive orcas, intensified the competition. The climatic changes of the Pliocene, altering currents and temperatures, displaced prey to areas less favorable for this massive shark. Deprived of abundant food sources and subject to increased competition, Otodus megalodon could not survive this combination of ecological pressures. The shark's disappearance freed up the super-predator niche, soon occupied by the great white shark, marking the end of an era dominated by giant jaws.